everybody. Okay, so let's talk about something haven't talked about yet. Kind of. Do we all have a favorite director out there? A person who directs a movie. A person who, has kind of the main lead to a film. Well, that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Directors. They play the big part in the movie of, pasting everything out. The director does the job of making sure the movie comes out the way he wants it to. And that's what makes directors a big part in the movie industry. So what I decided to do today is talk about my top 10 favorite movie directors of all time. And let's see how we're going to do this. There's a lot of great movie directors out there, so I'm ranking this off of my personal favorites. And by favorites, I don't mean iconics or, overall from how I consider from others. No, I'm not ranking this by who won an Oscar for what I love. This is just ranked off of which directors have done the most great films for me. Like, which directors have produced the most films that are among some of my favorites. That's kind of what I'm doing here. That's my opinion, so if I hear anybody saying I hate your opinion, well, that's not a criticism. That's just, that's not my fault, it's yours, so piss off if you think that. Okay, with that all said, I kind of don't know what else to say. These are my top 10 favorite movie directors out there. Don't hate my opinion, because I have it. Let's take a look.
Brad Bird. Brad Bird is kind of a over-the-top director. He hasn't done the most of what I've seen, but he has done a good chunk of films. I think the good movies that he's probably best known for my book, are The Incredibles. He directed the first Incredibles movie, but thankfully was able to return for the second Incredibles movie. And both of those films were definitely a great one. I actually do not know which one I find better. Yeah, it's one of those franchises that is hard to compare. I can't figure out which out of the two is the better one. So I just go out my life saying that the one I rank as my favorite is the original. With that said, Brad Bird did a good job with those films, because it's kind of one of the few times Pixar lets director alone do a film when they seem to have cliche directors on their own. Like, I'll talk about that later maybe, but I'm not going to tell you if. I'm just going to say that Brad Bird can direct fine. Now, this actually wasn't the first time he directed, and of course isn't the only time. Brad Bird has actually worked on animation before The Incredibles. He's worked on films like The Iron Giant, for one, as well as a bunch of other stuff. But I remember him most for The Incredibles movies because they seem to put out a very unique style that Pixar hasn't done before, making their movies more mature, more for adults to enjoy just as much. And that's kind of Brad Bird's good idea for, so I'm hoping sometime later Brad Bird can make another Pixar film that's not an Incredibles movie and make it just as intense as The Incredibles are, so adults can love it just as much as kids do. J.J. Abrams. The look on his face says it all. Everybody critiques him for having to put out Star Wars sequels. Everybody sees him and says, "You suck, J.J. Abrams, you're horrible." But let's talk about the people who defend J.J. Abrams. All two of them, me being one of them. I don't know which of the other is the one, so maybe just one. Maybe I'm the only person in the world who defends the sequel trilogy. And with that said, I think I'm going to have to give J.J. Abrams the credit he deserves. Because look at him, he just looks so upset. The picture I have here, he just looks like he's ashamed of what the fans are thinking of him. It's like he has a riot going on in his house saying, "You suck, JJ." There's people always criticizing him. And yes, I criticize directors too. But when I'm going to defend one, calling him one of my favorites, let's talk about this guy. Look, he did fine with the sequels, and I love them still. Yeah, I know you people really hated my video about why I like the sequel trilogy. Like, seriously, it's probably my most disliked video ever. I don't know if it's because I act too much like my opinion counts, or because y'all just can't respect my opinion. Either way, I'm respecting J.J. Abrams because he did not fail to impress me with his movies. He may have failed to impress all of you, but me, I was able to enjoy them. So I'm going to give him the credit he deserves. Hoping I can find the picture where he's looking at me right now, and appreciating how I'm the only person out there who likes what he's done with the Star Wars movies. I'm not saying he's better than George Lucas. I'm just saying he's fine if it's directing. And by the way, George Lucas isn't going to be on this list because I find J.J. Abrams better, but I guess I just can say George Lucas is better producer than director. So George Lucas is probably just counts as a director rather than a producer. I'm just going to say that. But J.J. Abrams is a director, and he's a fine one. Criticize me all you want. I like him. John Watts. Okay, now let's see what else we got here. Spider-Man. Here's another thing that John Watts can sometimes get criticized for. John Watts made the MCU Spider-Man movies. He made Homecoming, Far From Home, and is about to direct the new one, No Way Home. Hope he does good with this one. He's done great with the other ones, in my opinion. And he's definitely has some improvement over the other films. I'm not saying all the other Spider-Man movies are bad, but they're just sort of inferior to what I think of the MCU Spider-Man. The MCU Spider-Man is great in my opinion because, like I said before, he's the best job at evolving. He's able to evolve into becoming a superhero. He doesn't just turn out to be an incredible superhero at the very start. No, he evolves to start as an okay hero to become more epic as the time goes on. That's just what makes him my favorite one. So that's kind of what John Watts can think about. Him being able to make Spider-Man feel this special rather than just instantly become big superhero and face kind of similar ideas for the past. Yeah, I'm actually calling Sam Raimi out on that. He made some great Spider-Man films, but in the first film, Spider-Man had to face the Green Goblin, which was pretty intense. And Dr. Octopus and Venom, or Sandman, all the other villains in the sequels of Sam Raimi's trilogy, they all are epic, maybe better, but they probably aren't too much of a threat compared to the Green Goblin. I feel like Spider-Man just fights every enemy the same way, doesn't get improvements or challenges that are bigger. He just does the same kind of intensity that he had grown up with. With this Spider-Man, he starts with something simple, but then goes on to start doing some more epic stuff. To become more epic. So, I can either talk about Tom Holland for that, or John Watts. I'll say both. John Watts did a great job directing those films. Maybe he can make some other good superheroes have a better evolution time. Who knows? Maybe he'll do something good with his heroes sooner or later. Lee Unkrich. Remember when I said I was going to talk about some more Pixar directors? Well, here's one. Lee Unkrich. Lee Unkrich did Toy Story movies. His Toy Story career was just for two, actually. The only two Toy Story movies he made were the second one and the third one. That's it. He didn't make the first one, nor was he involved with the fourth one. Lee Unkrich was just, with those two films. He also did a bunch of other good ones, but with Pixar's career, I like him better for what he's done with Toy Story. As of course, that's my favorite one out of all Pixar's movies. Lee Unkrich made Toy Story 3, which is my favorite Pixar film of all time. So there's that. And he's definitely got a lot of great respect for his other stuff too, as he was able to get involved with Toy Story 2 thanks to the help of John Lasseter. John Lasseter made the first Toy Story film and did the second one with Lee Unkrich. So he's basically improved on with help, as Lee Unkrich took over for him, as it seems he doesn't really work for Pixar anymore. It's a long story I don't want to talk about, but yeah, John Lasseter's kind of old news to Pixar. That doesn't mean he's still not a great director for its films. He directs the first two Toy Story films in a pretty nice way. That's what makes them my favorite Pixar movies out there. And even though he wasn't involved with the third one, he gave Lee Unkrich the ability to perfectly make those Toy Story movies just as great as he can make them. Toy Story 4 doesn't have John Lasseter or Lee Unkrich involved in it, so I really don't think that should count for the variety. But with these two, they probably make a great duo, because of their ability to help Pixar with their greatest franchise. You know who else makes a good duo? Anthony and Joe Russo. Yeah, look, I know it may sound unfair how I'm just putting two directors who make the same equal amount of films I love in separate slots, but I was comparing myself if I should do that or not. Yeah, I was thinking to myself, should I really do that? Does that seem unfair? But then at the end, I actually kind of thought I was going to go ahead and just have that done, because I'm just trying to get this list over with. Okay, there's a lot of great directors out there. It's hard for me. So yeah, number 5 and 4 are the Russo brothers, who are best known for Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, the last two Avengers films. They've made other Marvel movies like the last two Captain America films, but yeah, they have a big part in the MCU. They made some of the best the MCU has to offer. I respect them for it, and I know I probably should give them the same slot if those are they both have an equal respect for those movies. But look, each slot is one separate director, and so that's just kind of what I'm going to do here. I'm sorry, but that's the rules in my book. My book may seem confusing to you, but it's my book. If you want to read it, come over to my house and read it. But yeah, these two brothers did great Marvel stuff. And they probably make a great impression on Marvel to what others do. And I know most people would say the best work for Marvel comes from the producers like Kevin Feige, as well as a bunch of other movies. I feel like producer means more to the movies than directors do. But these two directed Avengers Endgame and Infinity War. And those turned out to be great movies. So, thank you. I'm going to call them two out for it. I'm going to say that they're one of the reasons those movies were great. Robert Zemeckis. Okay, now let's talk about someone who's actually a lot more iconic. Robert Zemeckis is known for a lot of other great movies and doesn't just work on one franchise. He worked on the Back to the Future movies. He worked on Forrest Gump. He worked on Roger Rabbit, Castaway, Polar Express. He's done a lot of great stuff. And I think Robert Zemeckis is praised finally for his work, as he could just do his movies in a nice, unique style to where they all have a good catch to them. They all have a good ring, you know? They have a good taste of comedy and emotion that needs to be put into them. I guess Back to the Future is one thing I can call him for, but he also did a lot of other great stuff. Like, again, Forrest Gump he did. And I think he knew how to do Forrest Gump too. So Robert Zemeckis is definitely the perfect kind of person to direct those kind of movies. Like, Forrest Gump turned out pretty great, and I don't know if it would turn out as great if it weren't for Zemeckis. Maybe it could have, I don't know. But to my opinion, I think Robert Zemeckis made Forrest Gump and Back to the Future such great films. They have a good job for them. So I can give them the credit for being such fine work of art to those movies. To make them have a nice style to them with a good catch so we can have a good ring to their sense of humor and drama. Peter Jackson. Now here is a director who has had a big catch in his Oscar wins. I know I said earlier this won't be ranked on Oscar wins, but with Peter Jackson, he doesn't do it for the Oscars to me. To me, he does it for his work of incredibleness, that I think he deserves those Oscars more than anyone else did. What do we know him for? What else? The Lord of the Rings. If you know Peter Jackson, it's obvious, Lord of the Rings. Peter Jackson is just Lord of the Rings' greatest achievements. He just knows about those films in the best ways ever. I think Peter Jackson is very, very unique of a person. He's a person who must be predicted at all cost. Because I think Peter Jackson is just way too unique. He's just a nice person. I just really feel like if I met him, I would die happy, completely. I just love everything Peter Jackson does with his films. Because Lord of the Rings turns out to be such an incredible set of movies that Jackson is definitely the person you gotta blame for it. Okay, but with him being number 2, who's the one director of them all that completes me the most? Because despite Peter Jackson having the catch of being the one to rule them all, who is actually the one to rule them all for me? None other than Steven Spielberg himself. Steven Spielberg has been acclaimed by pretty much everybody, and he's definitely acclaimed by me. Spielberg made everything I love. He made Jaws, he made Jurassic Park, he made E.T., he made Raiders of the Lost Ark. He made almost every single iconic film ever. Steven Spielberg has to be my most praised ever. Because despite others like Peter Jackson or Robert Zemeckis having great effort put into their films, Steven Spielberg puts more than just effort in his movies. Passion, fame, icon. He does it all. He just recently did West Side Story remake, which I saw already. And I think that was definitely a good example of all the great work Steven Spielberg is able to put out. He's just able to make his movies very iconic, very interesting, the most interesting. He doesn't make my all-time favorite movie ever, Star Wars, but he did make some of the finest films that count closely to being one of my all-time favorite movies ever, and to think that I haven't seen every single film from him. Maybe, just maybe, one of his movies will be my all-time favorite ever. I don't know if that's true, but that's a possibility, because of how great Steven Spielberg is with what he has done. So yep, I love him. We all do.
I really rushed with this list, didn't I? I know. I did. Alright, well, I just wanted to get it out of the way. There may be other fun movie types that I can talk about soon, but they're my favorite directors. You hate me? Okay, sure. Go ahead. I get that a lot. Even from my family. Sad, isn't it?